Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So fabulous to be with our friends in room 2425. So fabulous to be with our friends who are on live stream. And our topic today is, when does a no become a yes? When does a no, when you want something, you really want it, and the answer is no, and it stings, and you have to deal. But then over the course of time, you somehow look back at it, and it turns out that that no is not cognitive dissonance. This is not rationalization. You look back at the journey of your life, and this no that was painful at the time turns out to have been a birth stool for an entirely different kind of positive yes. Uh, in the teaser, if you happen to have read it, I told the story of Quentin Brunson, who is the creative spirit behind Abbott Elementary, who was talking to Doreen St. Felix on the New Yorker Radio Hour. And Doreen St. Felix asked this question, what was your most impactful no? I had never even heard of that expression. And she tells the story. She had an idea. She's got a good friend. They're platonic. And they sleep together once. And she gets pregnant. She has the baby. And these two friends, the two characters, want to raise the child as co-parents. She thinks it's a great idea because this happens. It's real. And the Hollywood person says no. And it stung. And then she was able to create Abbott Elementary. And we're going to present two different moves here, a modern move and an ancient move. We're going to offer a story and a speech. And one is about changing deeds, and one is about changing attitude about realities that cannot be changed. So we're going to thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Page 63. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'harechna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael. V'nihya anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So they say in shul business, you always get your ratings by Kiddush, and the person who, there happened to have been no Kiddush on this day, as you'll see in a minute, but the person who scored the highest ever immediate ratings of, oh my God, thumbs up from everyone who heard him, was Arthur Brooks on Yom Kippur. Hence no Kiddush. But he spoke right before Ne'ilah, and people just loved him. And he talked about how he goes to Mass every morning and Rosary every night. And the next morning at Minyan, the day after Yom Kippur, I see people who I have never seen before at Minyan. And I say, whose yortzeit are you observing? And they say, no yortzeit. And I say, why are you here? And they say, Arthur Brooks. They're going to try to, no, that happened. That was real. It didn't last so long, but it happened. But it happened. Anyway, Arthur Brooks gives this speech a few weeks ago about the state of our country, and I want to start with the fishing story at the end. And Eliza, you've given about 2 or 3 sermons on fishing, and you seem to be never happier than when you are fishing with your beloved. Could you tell us what happens at that speed? And even, I'm from Denver, so I'm landlocked. I didn't see water till I was 18. There was something about falling tides, rising tides. I don't even understand what happened. But tell us the fishing story.
So Arthur Brooks is talking about what it is to be in a world, and how you're trying to take advantage of what is. And so he talks about going fishing. If you're a fisher person, then it's not just about going out, but it's about knowing when to go out and where to go out. And so he goes out at the wrong time when the tide is full and the fish are just not fully there. And he gets this advice that instead of going out when the tide is full, he should go out when it's falling tide, when the tide is going back out. And what that means is all the fish are going back out with the tide. And so all the fish are flowing right by him. And so it's much easier to catch fish than when they're just hanging out doing their thing and the water is more sedentary. And that's an image that he uses in terms of our country, thinking about what seems like a loss, what seems like everything is going the wrong way, can actually be an opportunity.
And could you just interpret, so thank you for interpreting the fishing scene. Could you then just expound on the place of that fishing metaphor for our country? What does he, how did, he changed where he fished and when he fished and how he fished and he got more fish. And what's the application of that metaphor to our country now?
So I think the application is that what we see as a falling tide, i.e., polarization, i.e., violence, i.e., challenge, i.e., inability to talk to one another, you can see that as like everything's going. Our country is going to, you know what? But the other possibility is to say what's in this movement, what can I catch within this movement, what's possible within this movement, and what is this movement carrying us towards? And that's, I think, the more positive read of a falling tide in our country.
Okay, so in other words, the no, the impactful no that he's experiencing or describing that we are, is a country that feels broken for all the reasons he mentions that we all know. That's the big no. And then the question is somehow change it up and become a country of love. Colleagues, what were your reactions to the Arthur Brooks article, to his prescription? He talks about faith, he talks about friends and family and work. What did you think? And somehow making all those spaces, faith, family, friends, and work, spaces of love. What thoughts and that would be a whole new impactful way to respond to this snow that we've inherited. What did you guys think about it? And by the way, what's the role of Temple Emmanuel in that vision?
So I think that actually, as usual, he hits the nail on the head. That especially in the past, during COVID, but even for the past decade or so, we've seen a falling off of all of those things. People seem to be less involved in faith communities. People seem to, especially with isolation, it's been hard to be with family and with friends. And with all of that comes I think a development of a narcissistic perspective on the world. And then when that happens, when the only perspective that we have is only in our own heads and not in relation to other people, then there's definitely clearly a falling off of our ability to then re-enter and re-engage with others in a civil way. You can see it when you're driving down the highway, how people have just forgotten how to drive with any kind of courtesy. People have forgotten how to stand in line in the supermarket. It's just all of those things just have such a major effect on how we interact daily. So with all of that comes with all that comes a sense of the fact that we just don't connect with each other, and therefore we don't listen to each other, and we can't actually then engage civilly with each other.
So that's the no. That's our
the no.
landscape.
Yes,
and
yes.
Michelle, what would we do to turn that no into something more of a yes?
So I think one of the core suggestions he has is one that conservative Judaism is actually emblematic of, which is building a shared vision, right? A sense that, yes, we might not agree on all of the specifics or the particulars. You might practice in a different way. You might think in a different way. You might have a different Torah interpretation than I do.
Yes.
But right? But we are a family. We are a shared community, and there's more that unites us than divides us.
Right.
Rather than, I think, what has happened both religiously and politically. He was pointing out politically, but I think it's also true religiously that there's something called Sheilaism that someone
Right.
coined the phrase. That it's all, my religion is all about me and what works for me. And the same can be said politically. The same can be said socially. That we've become an atomized society that's really about what do I care about and also what has harmed me, rather than what can we share, what can we build, what can we create in ways that lift all of our lives meaningfully.
Elias, what did you think of his piece, and what are some ways, if you liked his piece or thought any of it was interesting, how might it change your game as a Cantor Temple Manual, and how might it change our game?
Well, I
as
was
a
reading the
collective?
article. The only thing I could think was about when I was 20 and this girl who was really good looking said no to me. Going out, I invited her to go out. She said no. So that was such a big impact in my life. And I kept thinking about that. Anyways, joke, joke aside, I think that, I don't want to brag, but the solutions are pretty much what we do here every day, right? We invite people to come to temple to attend religious services. We love when somebody comes and says, I'm going to get married, and we want to marry them, and then they have kids. And then, we always say when they are new members, if you have 3 or 4 friends here, you'll stay forever. So it's the four things for
Right.
for a successful life with empathy and caring about others.
Right. So faith, family, friends, and work are things that we all try to do. But I want to talk just for actually the timing here is perfect. This coming Thursday night, we're doing a new move. We're trying to model this idea of a big tent, and we're trying to model this idea of people who disagree come together respectfully and thoughtfully. We're having a J Street event on Thursday night. We've never had a J Street event. When we first sent out this email that we're doing a J Street, a debrief on Ben Gvir and Bibi Netanyahu and the government that is extremely concerning, we got a gazillion people who signed up, who are coming, along with kickback. Like, how come you're having this perfidious organization? Elisa, what are your thoughts about bringing J Street into the tent at Temple Emmanuel and what it means for modeling civility among people who reasonably disagree?
So I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for us to expand our conversation on Israel. And I think in any healthy community, you have a lot of different perspectives and a diversity of opinion, and it's all really healthy and it's all present. And I'm really grateful that we can hold that we can hold APAC and J Street, that we can hold diversity of opinions on the left and on the right, and all come together. And I think one of the most important things for us is to develop a shared language of love. And that's something that, just to come back to the fishing metaphor, there's a camaraderie among people that go fishing. And it's also true for knitting, but I'm figuring, I don't know, there may be more fishers than knitters here. But when you go out fishing, if you stand on the side of a body of water, everybody, I was shocked by this, but people come up and like, what are you using, and what level of weight are you using, and what hook are you using, and how are you thinking about that? And there's this whole conversation. And I think in an ideal world, we would get to that place about Judaism, right? We would what are you doing for Shabbos, and how are you doing it? And we would get to that place about Israel where there wouldn't be that sense when we start to talk about Israel that our blood pressure goes up and that we feel like we shut down, we can't have that conversation. But instead, there's this level of engagement and excitement that we all feel this deep love of Israel, and we all want Israel to succeed, and we have different ideas of how that would be. And we're all hoping that we're going to catch that fish, right? That we're going to get to that place where Israel is everything that it should be, and where we can all really have a delicious meal together there.
Yeah, so I want to, we're going to pivot from Arthur Brooks to Leah, our mother, in a minute, but I want to close off the Arthur Brooks speech and the fishing metaphor with a question for each of us, which is, if you agree that the country that we're living in now, that the Jewish world that we're living in now is somehow in an impactful no state, that there's grievance, that there's polarization, that there's personal ad hominem, that if you disagree with me, it's not that we disagree, it's that you're a bad person, and that's where we are, and you don't like it, and you want to change it. The questions I want to ask you to think about, I always think about what's the delta, what's the difference that an idea makes, what's the difference that this speech makes, what's the difference that this fishing metaphor makes. What would you personally do different to turn that impactful no into a yes, to turn that culture of grievance, and if you disagree with me, you're a bad person, to a different way? What would you do individually, and what would we do as a community at Temple Emmanuel? I think personally, having J Street, and I've had many emails from folks who are not so thrilled about it, and we're in dialogue about it. I think being able to model civility, difference, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim, these and those are the words of the living God, are very important within bounds. And the question I want to leave you with is, what would you do differently? What should we do differently to turn this impactful no where we are into a yes? Now, here's the big difference with Arthur Brooks and Leah, and this is why I bring Leah. Sometimes the facts can't change. Sometimes you can't do anything about it. And the question that Leah deals with is, and I wanted to bring out Shai, I think we all know Shai Held. Shai Held brought something out that I had not realized before. And look on page 6. This is from Shai Held's article in his book, The Heart of Torah. I just want to read this because I found this so painful. In its inevitably understated way, the Torah tells us that even after Leah's death, Jacob still does not betray even a modicum of marital love for her. Instructing his sons to bury him in a cave Abraham had bought long ago, he remarks, "There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah." The reader waits in vain for Jacob to refer to Leah as his wife, but he cannot bring himself to do so. In death as in life, Leah remains unloved. So the conundrum of Leah is what happens when the impactful no cannot be turned. There's no facts. You can't change how you fish, when you fish, where you fish. The water comes, the water goes, and all of a sudden get fish. There's no changing. It just is. What's the lesson from Leah about dealing with not only impactful no's, but intractable no's? Implacable no's, intractable no's, unchanging no's. God bless you. What do we learn from Leah?
It's like Rabbi Gamzu. In other words, there's always what Leah does in this article is so beautifully presented that what Leah does is she's actually able to come to terms with what is, and then not only that, but be able to find some joy within that very sad existence. So she's able to actually find the joy in the everyday, kind of like what we do in davening every day. We find the miraculous in the daily, and I think that's the move here. It's really
Yeah,
quite extraordinary, actually.
Also, you need a little bit of hope, because if not, it's hard to carry out. I mean, hope is what gives us the possibility of continue trying to see a different outcome.
Right.
And I think that she's also doing that.
There's something interesting for me about Leah because she starts with what seems to be an intractable no, right? She, according to the Midrash, is not physically attractive, which was necessary in that time to attract a partner. And she didn't have the things going for her that would enable her to find a partner. And so she takes Jacob's initial no, and she, along with her father, thwarts that and creates a yes. But then what she wants is not the action. She wants the feeling, and she can't get that. And so I think there's an interesting teaching that when you push the river, when you push people against their will, there's never a possibility of a yes after that.
A person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still, right? Elisa, one of the idiosyncrasies that we love about you, and if you've davened together 1,000 services as we have, we notice that you are the only person I have ever met, who does the matriarchs, not Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, like everybody else on planet Earth, but you do Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel. And could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I switched Leah based on an experience I had in the cave of the patriarchs where she's buried, where her grave was just empty and bereft. There were people at every other grave, and her grave was just empty. And I was just feeling how unloved she felt in life, and that we continue this pattern, and feeling important that that she was his first wife, and that she's honored as such in our memories and in our prayers as a way of sort of a tikkun of repairing that breach.
To me, in the way that you guys see Torah differently, I see that paragraph very differently from you. I have no sympathy for Leah, and I have a lot of sympathy for Rachel. She's the one suffering here. She's the one who see her sister getting together with the man she loves and having kids with him. And for 7 years, imagine her for 7 years saying, is it going to be my turn? Once, when, how, why did God this to me? Why my sister did this to me?
Why is it either or? There's plenty of suffering to go around.
Because this is all about polarization.
Michelle?
Yeah, so I actually, one of the things that I find so interesting about Leah is that all of the other women are completely defined by their relationship to their husband and how it is that they interact with their husband. And Leah, on one hand, has an intractable no, that love is not going to be forthcoming. But on the other hand, her amazing spiritual move, which is why I put her last and separate from that line of wives, right? She kind of stands on her own in the sense of she reaches a moment where, as she's naming her children, she's naming them like, maybe my husband will love me, maybe
Right.
he'll see me, maybe it'll be okay. And finally she says, you know what, this time I'm going to praise God. Like,
Right.
I actually have to find something different to orient my life around.
Can we double click there? Because I find this one of the most profound points, and it never gets enough attention. This is in the handout on page 3. I'll read it out loud. But to your point, the first 3 kids are basically named. I never understand the Hebrew here, but it's my first kid, maybe my husband will love me. My second kid, maybe my husband will love me. My third kid, maybe my husband will love me. Okay. So now let's look at the pivot from from kid 3 to kid 4. Verse 34. Again, she conceived and bore a son. This is Levi, the third one, and declared, "This time my husband will become attached to me, for I have borne him 3 sons." Therefore he was named Levi. She conceived again and bore a son and declared, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing. In other words, and Judah, Yehudah, is where Judaism comes from. Like, the name of our religion comes from that moment where Leah, our mother, realizes that the pain that she has just is. It is intractable. And in the face of intractable pain, she's going to affirm life. And I just find that really resonant, that we're named for a moment of epiphany, that there is stuff that can't change, and that the movement it can't change with the most pain. And this is not a minor thing. This is like it's not like I couldn't get the reservations I want with the window at 8 o'clock. This is like a major thing. Like, my husband does not love me, does not love me, does not love me. Okay, this time I will praise God anyway. And we're named for that moment, and we're named for that insight. What do you make of that?
So I just want to note, the fact that she stops bearing here, you can read in 2 ways, right? One is she actually has achieved what her life needed to be about. She has created a relationship with God. She has become a leader. She's become an independent woman in her own way. Or you can read it kind of literally. She stops going back to Jacob. Right? Like, how do you stop bearing? You
Right.
you stop bearing by stopping trying to look for that love in all the wrong places.
So, yeah, so we have, if you step back, we have kind of 2 moves for intractable no's, or implacable no's, or impactful no's. One is we change our deeds, and therefore change the reality. One is when the reality can't change, we change our attitude towards the reality that cannot change. This time I will praise God. So I want to pivot the conversation to a more personal direction. I would like to invite anyone who wishes to share an example of an impactful no in your own personal life where you faced an impactful no and you either changed up deed, a la Arthur Brooks fishing, or you changed up attitude, a la Leah naming her 4th child Yehudah. This time I will praise God. What's an example of how you personally have responded to an impossible or an impactful no?
I'll go. It's funny. I was the beginning of this week. I was in Baltimore visiting a couple of college friends, and it was bringing back all these college memories. And when I picked out an undergraduate school, I thought at the time I wanted to go into the opera world, and I wanted to be an opera singer. And then, like, later in life, like second career, was going to go back to rabbinical school and do that. And I auditioned for all these different schools, and I got rejected from all of the top tier conservatories. And I got accepted at Vanderbilt. They had 2 music programs. One was music arts, and one was a performance major. And I got accepted as a music arts, which in the music world is like the second class. Like, you're like the less serious music students if you're a music arts student. And I didn't like that at all. I really wanted to be a performance major. So I auditioned 9 times for the performance major. And I was rejected 9 times from the performance major. And every time I auditioned, I would like get myself up and I would like try, and they would say like, no, you have all these academic interests, you have this interest in Jewish studies, you're not made to be a performance major, you're not a performance major. And I was like, but this is not about like what I want to do long term, this is about what I want now, and I want to be a performance major, and I want to be an opera singer, and I want to do that. And 9 times they said no. And because of that no, I didn't go on to graduate school of music. I went and said to Israel and then went straight to rabbinical school, and now I get to be here and met Solomon here and met this amazing community, and all of that has flowed from that no, which at the time was really devastating and I refused to accept, but over time has been really beautiful.
I have 2 questions for you. When you were between the 7th to 8th time auditioning or 8th to the 9th, first of all, 2 questions. What did you change from one to the other? And what was the thing that sustained you? Was it hope? What was it? Like, being stubborn?
I was like, they're
The
not going
latter.
to say no to me. It was not like, there was not any, like, it was so stupid. Like, what person is not just like, they're not going to let me do this. Okay, I'll find a better way. But I was like, no. I said no because I didn't have the right vowels. Or they said no because I didn't sing this. Or they said, like, every time I was like, okay, I'm going to do this better. And I would like go in and meet with them. And they're like, we don't think this is right for you. And I was like, no, this is going to be. And then 9 times later, I was like, I'd actually run out of, there are classes you have to take if you're a performance major. So after the 9th audition, I didn't have time to take those classes. So then I had to accept it wasn't happening.
I was going to start with a college thing, but since you started with college, I'll actually go before that. So when I graduated from high school, my parents gave me the opportunity to go take a trip to Israel. I stayed on a kibbutz, and I was just about turning 18, and I was so excited because everybody on the kibbutz was going and they were going to join the army. And I called my parents. I had gone to Israel very, very reluctantly just because I decided it was a better option than the teen tour they offered me otherwise, a lot more freedom on the kibbutz. And while I was on the kibbutz, I fell in love with not only the kibbutz, but Israel, and decided that I was going to make aliyah and join the army and become Israeli there. To which my parents, and if you're watching, hi, said, might we reconsider that? It's no, you can't stay here now. But if you come back and do 1 year of college, then at the end of that 1 year of college, if you still want to make this choice, we will support you in making aliyah, but come back and do your first year of college. So, of course, I went back. I did my first year of college, wound up going to Israel many, many times in the years afterwards, but I never made aliyah. And that led to a path. I changed my vision. I became really comfortable with my identity, well, mostly comfortable with my identity as an American Jew, and through a long and winding path, eventually found my way also to the rabbinate, which led me here to my favorite place on earth, Temple Emmanuel.
So, in addition of that girl that turned me down when I was 20, that was a hard no. But thank God, a couple of years later, I met Lorena, the love of my life, the mother of my kids. So we've been together for many decades. So, the Jewish community in Argentina works a little different. Synagogues don't have their own cemetery. There is one huge cemetery in the city where 30 synagogues go there and non-affiliated Jews go there. And imagine, it's like you walk on a Sunday, there is like Times Square, all right? So at one point I was hired to be the official Hazan of the cemetery. So I would do, no joking, I would do like, maybe 8 funerals a day or something like that. Yeah, without knowing the people. So I worked there for 2 years. In the meantime, the income was good. I was saving money to get married with Lorena. And then all of a sudden, they fired me. They fired me because they say, he's young, he has a bright future ahead of him, he doesn't need this job, and we can save money. All right? That was terrible for me. It was about maybe 6 months before I get married with Lorena. I was counting ahead how much money I was going to make in order to pay for the honeymoon and the apartment and everything we wanted to buy. That was like a shock in my life. But that led in a way for me to to start doing what I love, which is, studying. It's hard to hear and hard to imagine this, but I love teaching B'nai Mitzvah kids, and that in a way I became like a much more focused and professional cantor working in one place, and but at the time it was really hard. But
Wow.
then in a way, I'm grateful now after so many years.
Right,
Lord
so
Nesson.
Yeah, I have it's a similar story. When I was in another show, and my contract was going to be up, and I really loved being at that show. I loved that community, but there was also an opportunity to come to here to Temple Emmanuel, and I met with folks here. I was offered a contract, and but I was really only doing that as leverage to get a better contract where I was, and in the end they said, no, we're not. We don't think that you're. This is. We don't think that that what you're asking of us is reasonable, and that led me to come here. So that was also that. I mean, it was a devastating no because I really loved where I was, but in the end, I'm so happy here.
Can I
Thank
ask a
God.
question about?
What about
oh,
you?
I'll
Rabbi.
tell you in a minute, but just
Don't escape the question.
I know I won't. But I note that all of your stories end up eventuating in the chairs that you're sitting in now, right? In other words, so
Exactly.
all of you are in the chairs you're sitting in now because of some painful no. After 8, 9 times, no, you can't. You're not going to be the singer you want to be. You're not going to be the Zionist you want to be. We're firing you 6 months before your wedding. You didn't get the contract. Everything was a no, 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 and all that ended up here. And my and thank God it did, and you're happy here, et cetera, et cetera. Before I'll share with mine, but I'm just wondering, because you're, also people and humans and pray and try to wrestle with God. To what extent do you see? There's a little bit the story that I asked you when Rick Stone was here, Elias, about Lorena's father dying, which means that you met her, which means that Mikey was born after Miguel, etc. It's a variant to that question, which is, do you see God, providence, hashgacha pratit, like in the Joseph story, Va'adonai et Yosef, that's the recurrent motif, Va'adonai et Yosef, the Lord was with Joseph. Do you see God in this whole mysterious picture?
Michelle, you are so good with this.
I'm very, very much so. I mean, look, not directly as in, now I'm going to move the chess piece from here to there, but absolutely in the arc. And Brad Artson has this kind of theology that he puts forward about the lure. And no matter how many times he has explained it, it remains a little ineffable. But the idea that God is not kind of behind us, nudging us, but God is sort of in front of us, offering choices, options, go this way, go that way, nope, sorry, that way is blocked off. And as you walk through that maze, if you're kind of drawn towards the place where you ultimately need to go. Sometimes those things are very painful blocks in the path. I spent many years wondering what my relationship to Israel could be if I wasn't living there, right? And yet, here I am. I've got my children who are very powerfully connected to Israel as American Jews, and that's a beautiful thing. But that didn't always feel that way. So that lure that kind of pulls you forward to make the Leah move of saying, okay, what now? All right, so now I'm here. Now what do I do here? That perhaps can be where, at least for me, where I find God.
Wes, I believe that it's easy to say, yes, this was God's hand when the outcome is a nice, positive, and happy one. What happens when you go for the 9th audition and it doesn't happen, and then you don't find like a plan B, And if we think that God helped us in the good moments, we have to also believe that God wasn't there, or He meant it, or she meant it in the same way for not to happen.
Like Leah, exactly like Leah.
Like Leah, yeah. Any other comments on that?
Can we hear your story?
Yeah. So, I've had two conversations in my life that defined my life. The two most important conversations. One was a yes, and one was the most impactful no. And and the most impactful no I've been holding on to every day since I heard it, and it's as important as the yes. The yes, and I never dated until never had any girls, never had I had no game. I never went on a date. I had no social skills until I was, 20, 22, and I met and fell in love with Shira. And my kids can't believe I just said this. I said to her, I think I'm falling in love with you. And she said, ditto. And that was my entire dating experience. And now that's 40 years later. That's 40 years later. And my kids just like, my kids just can't believe that's my story, but that's my story. So that was the most important conversation, that ditto. Second most important conversation was kind of tied for the first. Um, was Rosh Hashanah in 2014, and the second day of Rosh Hashanah was October 1st. And you know, one of my favorite services at the shul is always the contemporary Rosh Hashanah service. It's a beautiful service, and then we always, Jill and her family always come to our house for the second day. We're having a festive lunch after all Rosh Hashanah services are over, and the contemporary service was so good. And my mother was there, and on October 1, she turned 90 years old. And so we had this whole elaborate choreography where, and all of her, a lot of her grandkids were there, was we were just going to offer my mother words of love after after the salad, what do you love about Bobby? And after the soup, what do you love about Bobby? And after the first course, what do you love about Bobby? And everybody would offer. And so, and three people at a time before and after each course told my mother, how much they loved my mother. And then at the end, and then I did at the end. And my mother, is my hero. My dad died when I was 20 on my mom. And so when I told her how much I loved her, etc. And what she said was, and now it was her time to respond, right before dessert. And she said, thank you, I've loved my life, but I'm done. And we just couldn't even take it in. We said, what did you just say? Like, all this love. She said, I'm done. I've loved my life. I've had 90 years. It's been a beautiful life. I love my life. I feel like I've had such a life of blessing, and now I want to pass. And we could not accept that. And I did all the things that you're not supposed to do as a rabbi, like make it about me and make it about us, and not be able to listen to her, etc. But in the end, my mother's no, and I was like 54 at the time, made me really grapple. My dad had died when I was 20, and I was just a kid in college. This was like a serious adult, and like, oh my God, she's not going to live forever. And anyway, as a result of that conversation, two things followed. One is I kind of get mortality now in a deep way, and I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm 61, so hopefully it's not tomorrow. But I'm at a deep level. I'm kind of okay with it, and you know, and the second thing is it kind of made me decide that every morning I want to wake up and savor this day and make the most of this day. From that conversation on, that was kind of my Arthur Brooks moment. After that, I started going to Minyan every day because I thought, like, I want to go to Minyan every day and make the most of every day because I want to be like my mom. I want to be at 90 years old, if I have whatever age I am, ready to say, I'm good. I've lived. I'm good. I'm ready to go. So that was my impactful no that makes me say yes to mortality. And therefore, if you're the more alive you are to mortality, the more alive you are to life. And that was the legacy of my mom's impactful no. So, Elias, you got a song for us?
Oh, in such a happy note. Could you pass it? So you let us know how much is for the therapy session we've done today. So Debbie Friedman wrote this beautiful song called "Sow in Tears, Reap in Joy." Let's do it. Those who sow in tears, will reap in joy, will reap in joy. Those who sow in tears, will reap in joy. Is the song of the dreamer, from a dark place it grows, like the flower in the desert, the oasis of our souls. Come back where we belong. You who hear our longing cries, our mouths, our lips are filled with song. You can see our tear-filled eyes. Those who sow in tears, will reap in joy, will reap in joy. Those who sow in tears, will reap in joy.
Thank you, colleagues. And now our live stream will be over, and we'll look forward to the conversation. By the way, if you're watching on live stream and you'd love to be part of the conversation, simple technical solution, just come. Shabbat shalom.